Oh, we are live. Welcome, everyone, and Hanukkah Sameach. Welcome to a very special rendition of Moshiach Matters. We have a beautiful shir this evening. So, without further ado, let's get started. I don't want to say this is one of the most amazing sichas I've done off the base, but I say that every week, but they all are. I have to tell you, this one is something special. Even though they all are something special, this one is something special. Let's see here. There's all kinds of funky stuff going on over here. Okay, let's rock and roll. So this is Parshas Vayigash. Let's get cracking. Du'abar pa'amim rabois shekol ninim amusufrim b'Torah v'kelim b'toicham v'kelelim b'toicham hara'as nitzchiyos kol yuri v'huri v'kol zman v'kol makom v'kol nitzav. We know, as we have expressed many times, that all the matters in the Torah, and the Torah is from the same root of hora'ah, which means to teach, to learn, that all the matters in the Torah are eternal teachings for every yid, in all times, in all places, in all situations. In other words, the Torah is not a history book, although it does contain Jewish history and the history of the entire world. It is, in fact, a book of a guidance, a map, an instruction manual on how to live at all times in all places. And every time we learn one of the weekly Torah portions, we have to ask ourselves, how are we living with this week's Torah portion? And how is it connected to our everyday lives? Just again, that wherever situation we may find ourselves in, it is Hashgacha Pratis, and there's a connection between what's going on in this week's Torah portion and the time we're living in. Of course, also this applies to this week's Parsha, Vayigash. Vayigash alav Yehuda. Yehuda approached. Shemimenu Yishana hara'a nitzachis amahabihira and the teres lehaving es teichen ha'avoda bo'efen and haga shel Yehudi. And this is an eternal lesson on how a Jew is meant to conduct ourselves in this world. Especially as it applies to these final moments that we find ourselves in the exile. And we are tremendously close, the Rebbe says, to the true and complete redemption. Base. Hashkafa Harishana. So the first period of matters we're discussing. But Gashas Hashaycha Shal Parsha. Im Hago'ula Ba'Pratiyos Hashabas. Excuse me, Haftorah Shabbat. So, let me continue, then I'll explain. Bo Medubar Oidois HaYichud Shal Yehuda. Yosef Lasidavo. So this week's Parsha and this week's Haftorah recount matters that are discussing how things will be with the tribe of Yosef and the tribe of Yehuda. So we see that specifically, it says in the future to come, this is from this week's Haftorah, it says the tribe of Yehuda, which is representative of the sphere of Malchus, and the tribe of Yosef, which represents the sphere of Yisod. Kach l'cha eitz echad v'kasu elav liYehuda goymer. Hashem says, and it's in this week's Haftorah, I will take one stick, and both of these tribes will merge, so to speak, into one, and Yehuda will be the one who is on top. L'kach eitz echad kasuv alav Yosef. V'karav oisem echad el echad l'cha le'eitz echad. Ko amar Adonai Hashem hinei ani anokach es bnei Yisrael mebin hagoyim asher halucha shem v'kspatzi oisem m'saviv. V'sisi oisem legoy echad u'melech echad yehei l'kulam v'dorav di Nasi, or David Adi Nasi Lehem, Leolam, Yedua Havai, Ani Havai. And it says so that he will take two staffs. One he'll write the tribe of Yehuda, one Yosef, and we'll put them together, and we will see that the tribe of Yehuda is the one that will be victorious. And David HaMelech, King David and Mashiach come from the tribe of Yehuda. And therefore it says, my servant David, my servant Mashiach from the tribe of Yehuda will be the ruling tribe and will be the ruler of the entire physical earth down here below, and all the nations will know that I am God. So we see in the future to come, Yehuda is going to be on a higher level than Yosef. But we know that this one second. So we have, even though the whole Haftorah is connected to the redemption and Yemot Mashiach, the days of Geula, nevertheless, it has to be applicable to us now in these times, even though we're moments before the Geula, before the redemption. So let's figure out how. Jerusha Gam Zvara Hashaychu Sayisha Haftorah Im Haparsha. Radarabba Yigash Lav Yehuda, and we see what appears to be a little bit of a contradiction to this week's parsha with the teachings we have in the Haftorah, because this week's parsha is called V'yigash, and it's referring to, how Yosef approached, how Yehuda approached Joseph. This appears to be the opposite of the teachings we have in the Haftorah, because as it's known, when one person has to come to another person, the person who has to make that journey before the other person is the person in a weaker position, right? It's like a boss calls his employee into his office and says, I want to speak with you. Who's in a more powerful position? Obviously the boss, right? The employee has to come in. It's like, oh, what's going on here, right? So the employee has to come approach the boss. So in this week's parsha, we learn how Yehuda approached Yosef, indicating that in fact Yosef was the one who was in a higher status, which is the contrary to what is going to be in the future to come, as we learned out in our Haftorah. Yehuda Yosef Mudgash Ech Yosef Hu Baal Habayit Umishaneh the Melech Shal Eretz Mitzrayim. And this shows how Yosef was the one who was in charge, not Yehuda. And it's known that Yosef was the second in command to the king of Egypt, to Pharaoh. Yehuda is okay, and Yehuda was afraid. He was frightened. Yehuda had to go and pretty much stand before Yosef and ask for Yosef to free his brother Binyamin. Obviously, at this point in time, Yosef did not disclose that he knew that they were brothers. So Yehuda had no idea. And he came before me and he said, my master, I am your servant. That's what Yehuda said to Yosef. I'm here to serve you. Because you are just like Pharaoh. You're second in command of all of Egypt. And you're just as important in the eyes of everyone else, like the king. I'll call it as Mitzrayim, that since Pharaoh gave all of Egypt to the hands of Yosef to rule over, and no one would lift a hand or a finger unless it went before Yosef. Musha, Kifa, Masha'ain came to see the Vo, Yehuda the Maga Mekulam. And this is not the case in the future to come. That Yehuda is going to be above Yosef. He's going to be above everyone. Melech Echad Yehi Kulam. That there will be one king to rule over everyone. And that's from the tribe of Yehuda. Melech HaMashiach. Avdei David Melech Aleim. And my servant, King David, from the tribe of Yehuda, will be above everyone else. The David Avdei Nasi Lehem Le'olam. And David, the tribe of Yehuda, will be the king over the entire world. So we see that this week's Parsha is in direct contradictions to this week's Haftorah. where there's a clear imbalance of power. Gimel. Yuvan ze v'hakdim biyor hashaychi shel tichilas haparsha im nisiyoyma v'medubar kama pa'amim sha'al pi haklal ne'ot seifan b'tchilasan b'seif yishnei shaychas me'acheres ben tchilas v'seif haparsha. Okay, and first of all we have to understand a connection to the beginning of the parsha and the end of the parsha. As it known, there's a general concept that the end is wedged in the beginning and the beginning is connected to the end. And therefore, there's a connection between the beginning and the end of all matters. And it says in the end of the Parsha that the Jewish people dwelled in the land of Egypt, in the land of Goshen, and they were fruitful and they multiplied. And this is showing on the strength of Yaakov and his offspring, because they had a prime place in Egypt, and they were multiplying. They were doing good over there. That even though they were in the land of Egypt and under the rulership of the king of Egypt, whose Pharaoh, nevertheless, that the whole land of Egypt is good. It's for you. Though the so we see in the beginning of the parsha, it appears that Yehuda again is in a weaker position because he had to go before Yosef, before Pharaoh. But in the end of the parsha, we see that the Jewish people were doing very good living in the land of Egypt. So it seems again that there's an imbalance of power between the beginning of the parsha and the end of the parsha. Magish v'Yehuda v'chav chinam b'metzav yiroy shehem zukukim tchilasan Yosef. He chayos shehu habalabayit shall call Eretz Mitzrayim. The fun of Tuda Yosef al achav hefek hagomar mahatoichan asiyah b'parsha. So again, we see these two opposite things between who's the one who's in a higher position of power. Dalet. So now let's start explaining. Once again, the fact that Yehuda approached Yosef and had to go to him and pretty much plead before him to release his brother is showing that Yehuda was in a position of less power and Yosef was in a position of more power. Yosef is the one who was determining whether or not he was going to let Benjamin go or not. And Yehuda had to go and ask for his release. And it says that Yehuda was afraid. Yitziim min haklal. So now we have a new concept over here. It says even though that Yehuda was afraid to go before Pharaoh, nevertheless we see that the way he presented himself with the Rebbe calls in Yiddish breitkeit. Breitkeit is berachov halev, with a wide heart, with a power, with a strength, like a lion. Yotziim min haklal. Yosef hayaz hashlit ahat. We already know that Yosef was in charge of the whole land of Egypt. But and no one lifted a finger without his permission. Yosef haya kamocha b'Paro. We know that Pharaoh put Yosef in charge of the whole land of Egypt, and he said, "You are second only in command to me, and you are just like you have the same power as I do." Excuse me. Nevertheless, the way that Yehuda presented himself before Pharaoh, it was with a wide heart, with breitkeit, boldness, cojones, as they say in Espanol. And he said he went without any permission whatsoever Toichef, and he went with strength. Even though he was afraid, he went in there without permission and with strength. Muda var'im amo kashois, and a hardness. Alpha pishahu hakanis es atzmai. Aidiza liskanas nafshois, even though he was in danger. Yadav ma leola Yosef lasois lo begala kafetz asoi. So just to put it in perspective, imagine if someone wanted to go to the Havdil, wanted to go to the White House, and wanted to go. I mean, it's a bad example now because it's not very a place of. But we'll use it anyways. He wanted to go to the second in command, the second in chain in command, which we don't know who that is because we don't know who the first in command is. But assuming that the names are who's really in charge, which they're not, but assuming that they are. So someone says, I want to go into the vice president and demand that the vice president demands of the president to release a certain prisoner. No appointment, no scheduling, no permission, just walks right in past all the guards and goes all the way into the office of the vice president and goes in there and kind of puts the hand out and says, I want you to release so-and-so. First of all, they wouldn't make it very far. They wouldn't get past the first step because they wouldn't be able to go in. But that's pretty much what happened. Yehuda went into the palace of the king with no permission, didn't ask anyone, he just literally walked right into Yosef's chambers, who's second to the king. And he went with a wide heart, with brightkeit, with boldness. And this is showing that even though Yehuda was in a position of less power than Yosef, it's showing on his strength and his fortitude, his determination. And this is indicative of how the Jewish people were in the end of the Parsha in Egypt, how they were in such a good place. And they were dwelling in a peace and they multiplied greatly. And it's also connected to the Haftorah, where Yehuda we see clearly is on the one on top. The David Abdi Nasi Lahem Le'olam, and my servant David, Moshiach, will rule over all the other tribes. The Yeshlamor, there's to say, Shahataychev Shav Yigash Alav Yehuda, Naisin Asakar Sha'achar Yaakov Bana the Erase Mitzrayim, Boyfriend Gazette. So the Rebbe is making a very powerful statement right now. He's saying the fact that the Jewish people were able to dwell in peace in the land of Egypt, and the fact that they commanded so much respect from Pharaoh, and he gave them the choicest of the land of Egypt, and he let them dwell and multiply greatly, is specifically connected to the way Yehuda conducted himself in front of Yosef and Pharaoh as well, because Pharaoh is connected to him, with brightkeit. It was his boldness that enabled the Jewish people to be victorious. Very interesting concept. And not only that, it's a preface, it's a preparation for the what will ultimately prevail of Yehuda and Mashiach ruling over all the other tribes in the whole world, as is going to be brought forth in the Haftorah. It all comes from this point, from Yehuda going in with brightkeit, with strength, with power, with fortitude, and determination. Hey, Ha'inin the Rush Ha'dayin Bior. But we still have to explain this a little bit deeper. Ha'ma'or le'el. Oido yisak taicha shove yigash alav Yehuda. Hayayad ifnei לפי כל סולדיך של יהודה שיוסף הוא משנה למלך של אומות העולם. לפני התודה יוסף על אחיו. Before obviously he really revealed that he was his brother. וגם שבין נויגל התכף של יהודה אין כל נפקא מינה. איך לאחר שנסגלה שזה יוסף. are the fi amitius ha'ininin. The chora kavar lo zekuchav the hatoichav shel Yehuda. Kedei the Paul v'chalbabot. Rather Rabba. The Pashtus agia hatoichav yechazoi boy. Ayre Yosef. Yishtachani Eloki. Lefnechem. Shum nechem she'aris ve'eretz lichayoysa nechal. Nechem lefrita gedoyla. V'zechus Yosef Amor. Paroi. Toiv kol eretz Mitzrayim nechem hu. Tzorah letzes lehem chazar b'mitav ha'aretz. Oifen chazar bo v'yipru b'ma'oi ma'oi. Okay, just emphasizing again the same point, stronger. All the exact rik lehavin ben noigel lehavtor. So mikevan she'atoichav shel Yehuda. Zeh rak ois she'ah. Eze shaycha sheish lezeh l'toichav shel Yehuda v'havtor. Adrabah, mikevan she'Yosef hatzadiku ba'adabayit b'mitzrayim. Oize the chorei toichav ha'hefem l'havtor. Bo medura oides le'ez v'yoda l'gabi Yosef. V'davar adin nasu lehem le'olam. So it's just emphasizing this point again. It says that, let's say, for example, that Yehuda had a flash of power, an adrenaline rush. And he did a few push-ups and he got pumped up, banged himself in the head, and he rolled in there like a lion. Okay, so that was a moment that he came in with this very powerful strength. But how can it be? Because Joseph was still second in command to all of Egypt. So how did the power balance shift from just that brief moment in time where Yehuda came in with, like a lion and demanded, there's different explanations of how he did it, of Yosef to free his brother Benjamin. And then we get to the end of the Parsha and also the Haftorah, where now all of a sudden the whole tribe of Yehuda has flipped on top of the tribe of Yosef and is much more powerful, and ultimately Mashiach will come from that tribe. The fee amitis ha'inyan she Yosef hatzadiku hashlit ha'aretz. We know that truly that Yosef was second in command to the whole land of Egypt. As bate Yosef atzmo es ha'tarchav shel bnei Yisrael be'eretz Mitzrayim. V'az ein tzarich lahagia b'shvil zeh ha'tarchav v'yigash lav Yehuda. Mekevan shekol ninim shehatorah him amitis nitzchim. And we already said that every matter in the Torah is eternal, and it's true for all times. So we have to understand again this momentary burst of power of Yehuda, how it totally changed the whole power balance of everything, of Egypt, of ultimately what will be in the future to come. It can't be that was just only for a brief moment in time. ודווקא הכוח זה יכול להיות שביחזו. וזה נעשה גם הקנה, ודבר הדין נעשה להם לעולם נעשה לבוא. As we already said, this was not just a little blip of power. This began the process of ultimately what would lead to the Jewish people's redemption from Egypt, from the tribe of Yehuda being the select tribe of where Mashiach would come from, and to the ultimate rulership of the tribe of Yehuda, of Moshiach himself, over the whole world, from this episode. It's pretty wild. ויש לומר שזה מובן גם במה שכתוב ואת יהודה שלח לפניו על יוסף להוירוס לפניו ישנה. לפניס לא ימקיים להוירוס איך יתשבו. לכאורה, מכיוון שיוסף שהנהיג אז ארץ מצרים, הוא נעשה מטבע הארץ ליעקב אבינו. In fact, we see it was Joseph, the one who gave this land to Yaakov and his offspring at the end of the Parsha. אם כן מדוע זקוקים להודות לפניו לא מקיים לחרוס איך יתשבו. וזה מובן שדווקא התוקף של יהודה מקורך לפועל הזויס. יש מה נקודה זויר בזה, okay, we're just strengthening the question, של יהודה בעולם הזה בזמן הגלות, we see that the strength of Yehuda, the way he conducted himself in the time of the exile, גוף יכול להיות בשני אופנים. It was conducted in two ways. Aleph, התוכף שלו הוא רק כפי האפשרי לפי הכללים של חוקי וטבע והנהגת העולם. ועל דרך זה, בזמן הגולוס, לפי המדינה הגבלה של הגולוס. חוקי המדינה כיוצא בזה. Okay, one. התוכף של, that the strength of Yehuda is only according to the possibility in general of the laws of the nature and the conduction of the world. And we conduct ourselves in the way of the exile according to the laws and the parameters and the boundaries, if you will, of the exile and of the country we're in, right? You have to follow the laws and the customs of the country you're in. You can't just run around and say, I'm a chassid of the Rebbe, and just start breaking through things and doing whatever you want. You have to go according to the customs of the place you're in. And secondarily, based, who made the Ganri the on the other hand, he conducted himself completely above the nature. In other words, he worked within the nature, right? But he came with a mindset, with an attitude that he wasn't bound by the laws of the nature. He was above the nature. And this is a concept, by the way, that the Rebbe carries forth in all of these teachings and all these sichos about this idea of living in two realities. That we have to conduct ourselves in accordance with the laws and the customs of the place we're in. But on the other hand, we have to realize all the time that God is the one who's responsible for our lives, that it is God who will determine whether we're successful or not our boss or the nature or the place we're in. And ultimately, the one who's really ruling over us is not the nations of the world, God forbid, but it's God. Right? It's like, I've don't get me wrong, I'm very happy that Trump is about to be president. But I think a lot of people have gotten a little bit too carried away, and they think that somehow Trump is Moshiach, that he's the Redeemer, that he's going to bring salvation. Nothing of the sort. It's God. The only reason he's sitting in the place he is because God has put him in there. And the only reason that he will be successful is because it's from God. So we can't lose sight of the focus that no matter who the people are, the players are in this world, for apparent good or apparent evil, and you never really know, because everyone's kind of a combination of everyone. And at the end of the day, they say that there's two things that corrupt a man. One is his stripes on his shoulder, in other words, the kavod, the higher he ranks in power, and two is the money. The more money he has, it causes a corruption of the way we think, unfortunately, because it goes to your ego. So everyone is tainted outside of the Rebbe. There's always negative and positive in everyone. So we can't, think for a moment that it's not God that's really conducting the world. And that's what the Rebbe is pointing out. Now, on one hand, Yehuda went according to the laws of the nature, based on the fact that he was conducting himself in the land of Egypt according to their customs. And on the second hand, he conducted himself with strength and power, that he was not bound by the laws of exile. He was living in a redemptive mindset, in a Mashiach mindset. For Yesh Lamar, this to say, now we're going to talk about that. Because at first blush, it could seem that these are two complete opposites. And they do appear to be so. But yet they're not. Or they are, but there's a way to synchronize them. There's the say, so no one goes. So there is to say that the strength of Yehuda and the way he conducted himself and the way Jews conduct themselves is not only the fact that we're under the leadership of the nations in the world and we have to go in accordance with the customs of the world, but that we have to at all times be completely above this. We have to work, yes, in the nature. There's laws. There's a hierarchy, right? There's policemen, and there's judges, and there's governors, and there's mayors, and there's states, and there's presidents, and there's a whole system that's set up in this Olam Hazeh, in this world of Galut, as we call it. And we have to go in accordance with this law. But we have to realize all the time that it's not these laws or these people that are governing us. It's God. And the only reason we're conducting ourselves in accordance with these laws is because God has instructed us to do so. It's a delicate thing, the balance between these things. But let's talk a little bit deeper. Mordechai. And now the Rebbe is going to connect this whole episode to a similar episode in the past, as it dealt with in the times of Purim and Achashverosh and Mordechai the Jew. שהוא היה במצב דומה ליהודה ועמדו לפני יוסף. Very similar situation, the Rebbe says. וכיוון שבני ישראל אז היו בגלוס פרס, ומדי תחת שליטה המלך אחשוורוש. At the time of Mordechai the Jew, the Jewish people were under the leadership of the nation of Paras, of Midian, of Persia, they say in English, under the auspices of King Achashverosh. He was the ruler at the time. Nevertheless, Mordechai the Jew said, I will not bow down. Sorry, I don't care who you are. We know the whole story. Achashverosh put Haman in charge. He gave him his ring, and Haman went around and said, yo, this is my ring. Kiss the ring. And everyone was scared to death about this guy's in power. They saw what he could do if you don't bow down to him. He could have you murdered. He's a cruel dictator. And everyone was scared of him. Not Mordechai. Sorry, I'm not bowing to you. I don't care what your ring says. I don't care who you think you are. I'm a Jew. I do not bow before anyone other than God. Every single other person bowed down before Haman. He came to because he was in charge. The king put him in charge, just like Pharaoh put Yosef in charge. I mean, it's different. He's a Jew, whatever, but second in command. Mordechai made kach b'techav afilu k'she'avdi hamelech amru madua ata oived es mitzvot hamelech. Nevertheless, Mordechai refused to acknowledge or bow down. Okay. The the mishter shalom hamelech Achashverosh kasuv b'Megillas Esther came yisoid hamelech. The says karat sign ish v'ish. We know that at the time King Achashverosh made his great feast. That's how the entire story of Purim begins. It was, he said, ish ke-ish. However you want will be. In other words, this feast is for everyone in his kingdom, and every single person will have exactly how they want it to be. Oimreis al-kacha Gemara, and the Gemara, Mesechus Megillah, questions this. So it says, ish ve-ish. So the head of the kingdom was, putting Achashverosh aside, the ones who actually were dealing with the day-to-day rulership was Haman, and the head of the Jewish people was Mordechai. And their wills were complete, one opposite the other. Mordechai had one will, and Haman had another will. Mordechai to conceive ish Yehudi, Mordechai the Jew. Haman conceive ish Tsar ve'oyev. He was the minister of all the nations. The Midrash, so how can it be, the Gemara questions, that the king could make a giant feast and said each one can conduct themselves exactly how they want, when the two main players' wills were at complete opposite of the others? It doesn't make sense. So how can it be? Okay. Now let's look inside. I just want to look at my footnotes because this is a little bit of a deep dive we're going to take. Okay. So now we're going to break down two different opinions in the Gemara. Aleph. This is according to the Midrash. The Midrash is breaking down this idea of the feast is for ish v'ish, however they want. Amar la'Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So the Midrash is going to challenge this Gemara, and basically this Midrash, and now we're going to challenge it again after this in a separate Midrash. But this first Midrash is basically saying this isn't possible. What has been explained is a illogical concept, and you can't have two opposite wills together. And so let's go inside. Amar la'Hakadosh Baruch Hu, ani eino yotze midei barusi ve'es mavakesh la'aseis karatzon ish v'ish. Hashem is basically saying to Achashverosh, you can't make a feast that two opposite realities exist, because I myself can't do such a thing. So if I can't do it, how can you do it? ונוהג שבאוידם שני בני אדם, מבקשי איש אישה אחד, יכולו הוא הנעשה לשניהם, אלא או לזה או לזה. And an example is brought down from this midrash, where God says, hold on a second. If two men want to marry one woman, they both can't do so. They're at odds with another. She can only marry one of them. It can't be that both of their wills will be fulfilled because they both really want to marry her. So you have two people who want something, but they both can't get it because she can only marry one man. אחז מבקשת רוח צפוניס ואחז מבקשת רוח הדרוניס. יכול יהיה הרוח אחד להניח על מה שלהניח. He said the same thing. If you have two sailors and their ships out in the sea, and one says, I want Hashem, please send me a northerly wind, and the other says, Hashem, please send me a southerly wind. I can't send them both. I got to either make the wind go to the north or to the south. They have opposite wills. I can't make both of them come true at the same time. I got to pick one or the other. And it's the same thing with Achashverosh. You have one group of people who are the Jewish people under Mordechai, and he wants a kosher meal. Everything should be kosher. It should be sneas. There shouldn't be any non-kosher food present. There should be women should be dressed modestly. Everyone should be conducting themselves in the way they're supposed to be. And then you have Haman who says, I want an orgy. I want naked women. I want people having sex all over the place. I want the drugs and every possible debauchery possible. How can those two people coexist in the same party? That's not possible. It's not possible. You got to pick. You want it to go according to Achashverosh's way, or you want it to go according to Mordechai's. I'm sorry, you want it to go to Haman's way. You want it to go according to Mordechai's way. You can't have it both ways. Zot אומר שאחשוורוש עשה מכך תעוז, מכיוון שאין זה שייך לבצע שני הפכים בבית אחד. You can't have two opposite complete parties in one room. It doesn't work. Hein karatzon Mordechai, because one is according to the will of Mordechai. Hein karatzon Haman, and one is according to the will of Haman. The role akasuv. So basically that midrash is saying it's not possible. God says to Achashverosh, very nice, I appreciate your attempt to make everyone happy, but you can't. You got to pick. The party's going to be set up for Mordechai and the Yidden, or it's going to be set up for Haman and the Goyim. You can't have both together. Okay, moving on to the next concept. Rabbi Chayna b'shem Rabbi Binyamin ben Levi Omer. So now we have another perush in the Gemara that's going to try to tackle this concept of these two opposite wills. They said it's true. In the current setup of the world as it is, in this galut, you can't have two opposite realities. You cannot have a northern wind and a southern wind blowing simultaneously because they're complete opposites. The But in the future to come, such a thing will be possible. Because the very nature of Geula is that complete opposite realities will coexist. We will be living in physical bodies, but we will not be bound by the laws of nature. In other words, the Rebbe has a sikha where he explains that all of the technology in this world is only moving at a rapid pace, trying to keep up with the godly energy that's coming into this world. So as God brings us closer to redemption, you've got thousands or millions of people in China and Tel Aviv and all these high-tech hubs all over the place, and they're trying to build computer systems and programs to take this light of Geula and move it fast enough that they could monetize it into a product. Look what we've got. We've got a new super chip. We got this. We got that. Look how fast my phone goes. My computer goes. It's all not real. It appears to be real, but in the future to come, we're not going to need it. So it'll be like science fiction. Like we'll be talking right now and be like, I wonder how things are in Jerusalem right now. Oh, let's go check it out. Blink, and we'll be sitting in Jerusalem. No airplanes necessary. In physical bodies. That sounds preposterous, but it's not. It's not, because God creates time and space. And right now we're bound by time and space. But in the future to come, the fourth and fifth levels, time and space, will not contain us. We'll still be in a physical body. So you have two opposite realities existing, which right now is not possible. But it says in the future to come it will be. Zot emerges to say sha'af shi'u base. That God will be able to fill two complete opposite wills. But it's saying, but now no. Future to come, yeah. So the first midrash said, no, that's an impossibility. Second midrash said, it is impossible. It's not impossible, but now it is. And the days of Mashiach won't be, but for now, it is. You can't have two opposite realities. But now, currently, as the way we live in this physical world, we are bound by the laws of nature. Okay, so like, just to give you an idea, a tzaddik is not bound by the laws of nature. It just pops in mind. We just had Yurtes Kislev. There's a story of the Alter Rebbe and Rabbi Levi Berdichov, both tzaddikim, both not bound by the laws of this world, both capable of living above the nature in the nature. But they were at a wedding hall, and they had to go. And an important Jew needed help. They had to go. It was an urgent matter, and they were in a back room in the wedding hall. There's a lot of people, hundreds and hundreds of people, and would have taken several minutes to walk through the crowd. So we're standing in a corner, and like, how do we get out of here? And Rabbi Levi Berdichov turned to the Alter Rebbe and said, "Let's just go through the wall. Let's literally walk through the wall." And the Alter Rebbe said, "We don't do such things like that. To us, that's impossible. You can't walk through a wall. But a tzaddik, whose body and soul are above this world, can." But the Alter Rebbe said, "We don't do that, because we work according to the laws of nature, even though they were capable of being above the laws of nature." Okay, Zion. Let me see what's going on here. 1 second. Okay. יש מעיינים בזה כמדובר אוי דויז בנוהג שבאוילם ועל דרך זה נצר הקדוש ברוך הוא וכפי שמתלבש בין הגס האוילם. The way that God conducts the world is that he encloses himself into the nature of the physical reality. וכן לא יכול להיות הנהגה של לעשות כרצון איש ואיש. And therefore, according to the laws of the nature, two opposite wills or desires cannot exist. Because the way the world is conducted, the way that God has chosen to conduct the world, is according to the laws of nature of the world. Like the will of Mordechai and Haman, because these two wills are opposites. Nevertheless, God is obviously capable of conducting himself and the world above the nature, because he creates the nature, right? God's name above the nature is called Havaya, Yud-Ke Vav-Ke, and God's name in the nature is called Elohim. One is the way God works in the nature, one is the way God works above the nature. It is God's preference to work within the nature, because that's how he created the world. He doesn't want miracles being in such a revealed way to the point that we won't have free will. So he wants us to conduct, and he conducts the world in a way of the laws of the nature that he creates. And therefore, according to how things are now, you can't really have two opposites exist. And this is the difference in the explanation between the Midrash and the Gemara, as we said above. The example in the Midrash, the first example given above, is that the way that the world is and the things are conducted in the nature of the world, meaning there's no such thing. You can't have opposite realities exist. The Perush Sheni, and the second explanation, is saying, but in the future to come, two opposites will exist. And you can't exist above the nature and in the nature. And there can be a northern and southerly wind at the same time. And that's how God will conduct the world in the future to come. Mashma'ot b'Gemara yotzea shegam la'asos karatzon ish ve'ish. So it's implied in the Gemara that in the future to come, that the will of two opposite people will be able to come true. בזמן אחשוורוש הלסוילה מפני שגם בזמן הזה לכל יהודי הלא ישראל לדרגה של להשיא לבוש אלוהילה לעשות כרצון איש ואיש כדרכם. So now what the Rebbe is saying is a major chidush. It's something very powerful, and for those of you who join us every week and have been learning the sichos, you will see that everything in these teachings over Linolf and Beis, the entire year that the Rebbe brought us into the Keter, into a redemptive consciousness, is preparing us and bringing us into a new state of consciousness that Moshiach is here now. And we can tap into this energy now. And that's what the Rebbe is saying now. He's saying that we have the potential now to live completely above the nature in a miraculous way, that there's nothing in this world that has any power or influence over us other than God himself, and yet conduct ourselves in the nature. That this reality of the future redemption, the two opposites can exist now, but can exist now if we choose to enter into Mashiach consciousness. If we choose to elevate our consciousness and live above the normal reality of this world, we have the power right now to live in a state of redemptive consciousness. Ches. So let's explain even further. It's known that when we say Achashverosh, it is it's referring to, there's two Achashveroshes. There's King Achashverosh as he exists enclosed in klipa, in impurity, and there's King Achashverosh in a state of purity, which is referring to Hashem, the energy from above in a deeper, holy way, so to speak. And that's what it means. Achashverosh, which is the beginning and the end, belong to him. Runs the whole world. Kain Yisoid HaMelech. The says Karatzon Ish Ve'ish. Ka'el HaOifen Bo HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kava Es B'Seder HaOlam. And Hashem can, in a supernatural way, allow for the possibility of two opposite realities to exist. That's how it will be when Mashiach comes. Ratzon Ish Ve'ish, the will of one and the will of another. Rishus l'chol adam nusenes l'ratza l'hatoy l'atzma l'deh toy v'ler d'sadi korasha v'yido v'im ratza hatoy. As for the Rebbe Rabbi Yisrael Rasha v'ler Rebbe, the Rebbe said it's all in our hands. Each person is granted permission to be a tzaddik or a rasha. Conduct yourself like Mordechai, or conduct yourself like Haman. But this is only a connection to the essence of the existence of the will of one and the other. This is not the case to do the will of one and the other. Because we know the will of Mordechai is connected to holiness. Ratzon Haman hu be'ini hafichim, and the will of Haman is the complete opposite. But me the lo yitechen kishna haretzoinos itmalo b'sha'as maseh before us. Oh, nekayim ratzon Mordechai or ratzon Haman. But we have to pick. We can't live simultaneously as a Rasha and a Tzaddik together. Where do you want to be? How do you want to conduct yourself? You want to be connected to God? You want to be connected to Klippa? Amen. Freilich and Hanukkah. Welcome, Levi Yitzchak. Got some deep stuff going on here, guys. But let's go deeper. This contradiction of two opposites, wills, one or the other. Either you sit as it, Ratzon Mordechai v'Haman. Hem shtei gishrei shonis legamri. Makol echad shelo legamri lekora el sheni. Ratzon Mordechai hu anhad lo ifrin lo yichra v'lo yishtahaveh. The will of Mordechai is, I'm not going to bow down. God's in charge, not you. Sorry, Haman. I don't care what your badge says. I don't care what your ring says. I bow to no one, only to the King of Kings. Oh, Shem Hafachol Ba'alma Hazer Shakal Hapeu HaKoifer Ba'alma Hazer Nikra Yehudi. Lochein Nikra Yakal Yehudi B'Shem Yehudi. And that's why it says Mordechai was from the tribe of Binyamin. So why is he called Ish Yehudi? Because every Jew, Yehudi is Yehuda. Every Jew is Yehudi. What is Yehudi? It's someone who praises God. A Jew, a Yehudi, is someone who says, only God is in charge of me. Nothing else and no one else in this world. I'm not frightened by anyone or anything. No one. I'm reading, going through the second time from Lukuti Devarim from the Frierdiker Rebbe. If you have not read it, it's in English, and you could get in English Hebrew. There's 6 volumes or 7 volumes. It's amazingly powerful. There's so many beautiful nuggets of things in there that are just incredible. But and the part now where they arrest him and take him to the Spolniker prison in Russia, Shemishmor. I'm not going to go into the whole story, but you see the way he spoke to these prison guards. He basically looked at them like they were nothing, because in his eyes they didn't have any existence, because he only serves Hashem. And this is what a Jew is, Yehudi. And therefore a Jew is not intimidated by anything in this physical world, and we don't bow down to anything, right? Bowing down in today's terms could mean a million things. It could mean doing something wrong, illegal, or immoral just to make money, because you're afraid that this person who you think is in charge of your money is not going to give you the money, or you're not going to be able to do a business deal if you don't break this law or do that wrong, because that's how you have to do things. And it's the complete opposite reality, because God's the one who determines whether or not you're going to make that money. But when we're in the fog of exile and we think that it's not God, we think it's our boss or the business person or that person sitting across the table who's trying to get us to do things a little to the left or the right, a little in the gray, and say, come on, this is how we got to do things. And you're having a second thought. Well, I don't know, maybe I need to because the deal won't get done. No, it's all BS. Only God runs the world. This is Yehuda. This is a Jew that we are totally acknowledging all the time, that we don't bow down to anything other than God. That means if it's against God's will, we're not interested. It doesn't make a difference what you're promising, what you think is going to deliver. And Haman represents what we call avodah zarah, or idol worship. And the Rebbe is saying idol worship is not just something that is evil, so to speak. It's anything that's against God's will. If there's anything in this world that you can't shut down or disconnect from, you're worshiping it. This is the biggest idol worship in the world right now. It's called a telephone. It's the biggest imprisonment of mankind right now. You take a generation, I don't know what these generations right now, X, Y, Z, I can't keep it anymore. You take their phone away from them, they will go into nervous sweats and have a breakdown. If you can't take your phone and shut it down, if you can't shut the TV down, if you can't shut off the sports scores, if you can't separate from a desire from food, drugs, money, girls, whatever, sports, whatever it is, you can't just sit by yourself and be at peace with no outside stimulation. then you're enslaved to whatever it is that has that power over you. And we may not realize it, but try to separate from some of these things, and you'll see what I mean. So avodah zarah is something that's opposite the will of God. Avodah zarah הדבר הזה ליהודי, מכיוון שגם אישה יהודי, אביך בשמיים. Because the true will of every Jew is only to serve our Father in heaven. The essence inside of us is part of God, and that part of God only wants to reconnect to God. It doesn't care about anything else. It doesn't care about cars, sports, houses, food, nothing. It just wants to follow the will of God. Like it says, אני לא נבראתי אלא לשם שכני. I was only created to serve my master. וחייש נברסי הוא. כל רגע ורגע שקיעים ואדם בעולם הזה. המובן שכל פרט בעבודה שלי וכל רגע צריך להיות לשם שכני. Every single moment of the day, a Jew asked ourselves, why am I here? What is my purpose? Why am I sitting here at this time and place? Why has God put me in this situation? And it's not because they have a new hamburger at the new steak place and he wants you to have a first bite of it. That's not what it's about. It's about what could I be doing at this moment in time to serve my Creator. All of your deeds shall be for the sake of heaven. And you should know God in all of your ways. And this may sound like a foreign concept to a lot of people, but when Mashiach comes, it's going to be like a light switch. Everyone's going to wake up and be like, oh my God, what was wrong with me? I can't believe how much time I wasted and how much stupid things I've been doing all this time. We're going to realize we're here for a purpose, a higher purpose. Call therefore the Eonom in all your ways. Call Dafka specifically all Lora Kal Masecha, not only all your deeds. Call Masim Shelcha, and the Gam Shekol Masim Ba'atzmi Call Kulo L'Shem Shemayim. But every little aspect of your life should be dedicated to your Creator. Sure, that doesn't mean you can't enjoy your life. It doesn't mean you can't have nice things and go on nice vacations and eat nice meals and drive nice cars and have nice houses. Not at all. But it's a basic concept in halacha. What is the ikar and what is the tafel? Are you living for yourself and you're throwing God a bone once in a while? Or are you living for God and at the same time enjoying the world that God has graciously bestowed upon us? It's a shift in awareness, a shift in consciousness. Avodah shazar. What is avodah zarah? It's about yourself. That's when you're thinking about what you want and what you and the number one cause of all anger, frustration, depression, anxiety is entitlements. This is what I wanted, and this is what I got. I was anticipating X, and I got Y. This is idol worship. And the Masech Darchechu Gufa De'ehu Shemayim Atzma. Okay. Mordechai. And this is Mordechai. He said, I want nothing to do with anything that you have here, Haman or Achashverosh. I don't care about your feast. I don't care about your palaces. I don't care about your money. I don't care about your cars, your prestige, your honor. It means nothing to me. I only want to fulfill the will of God. Shum davar ha'olam. Kivan shekol davar she'eino avodas Hashem hu avodah zarah. Mordechai is basically, if you're not serving God, you're serving idols. In other words, the second you shift your consciousness away from what God wants to what you want, that's it. It's idol worship. It's now about the I. The Omad Zot. Ratzon Haman. And if you think like the nations of the world, you go out of a Jewish state of consciousness, now you're connected to Haman. What does Haman want? What I want. Physical, I want food. I want money. I want this. I want that. I want that. I want the watch. I want the this. I want the that. Avodah zarah. This is idol worship. It doesn't literally mean that you're bowing down to idols. And the call avodah zarah. Anything that is not the service of God is just service of idols. That's what the Rebbe is saying. It doesn't mean that you're physically bowing down in front of a stone altar. One second. Okay. מכיוון שנמצא בעולם הזה בגלוס, היינו שנאים לחוקי הגבלס הנהגה הטבע. ולכן צריך להקשיב בזה על פנים בנוגע לדברי רשות ואין ההוד. But the Rebbe says, we find ourselves here in a physical world, under, so to speak, I don't say the rulership, but under the laws of the nations of the world. Each one of us in a different place, in a different city, in a different country, in different wherever it may be, and it's galut. We have nations of the world that are supposedly, or trying to run this world, run our cities and our states and our governments, whatever the case may be. And here we are, and we've got to deal with it. And it comes out from this to do according to the will of one and the other. Mordechai and Haman. As a Jew finds herself in this physical world, in the time of the exile, we have a lot of boundaries and obstacles and challenges that we must conduct ourselves according to the nature of the laws of the country where we are in. The Malchus Dina, the laws of the country. Hagbalo is Manhagi HaMedina Kudu. Shehem Achrichim Oisa. Lanhag Ba'ifam Nisyon. Azai Lo Yitechan Hakim. Shal Kratzon Ish Reish. Haratzon Mordechai. The Chorash Lo Rag Es Hakim Haratzon Haman before. And the Eska Hagisha Tetzrich Lichis Bar Hashev. Manhag Shal Adam. The Eidich. אם מחשבים בכך שקודש ברוך הוא שלח את בני ישראל בגלות, צריך אז לכאורה הנהגה להיות כרצון המן, הנהגה במדינה בקרב מנהגה של אדם. So it appears to be that we are in two opposite contradictions. God sent us into an exile, and there's a world around us, and the world's a tricky place. There are certain ways that we must conduct ourselves in a world. And a lot of times it appears to be the opposites of what God wants, right? Why do I got to work 7-8 hours a day? Shouldn't I be learning Torah all day long? Doesn't make sense. Why can't I work an hour and make enough money that I can learn Torah all day long? There are little pockets of physical reality that we find ourselves in that appear to be the opposite of what God's will is. But the Rebbe says, but let's look at it in a new light. That when one is connected together with God, then at that point in time, you can gut yourself. Ooh. Yeah, I hear you, my brother. Scotland must be a difficult place to find yourself in the exile. We're here in Miami, Florida, and it has its own set of difficult, unique circumstances. And believe it or not, sometimes when things seem to be more open, in a way they're harder, right? And we know that the Alter Rebbe, when he had to choose between the French and the Russians, he chose to side with the Russians because he knew at that point in time that in France, the Jewish people would have abundance and whatever they wanted in the material world, but spiritually they'd be imprisoned. Where in Russia, they'd be in a place that appeared to be very dark and imprisoning, but their souls would still be free. So that's the challenge, is to find opportunities. Join us every Monday night at 8 o'clock. We learn these teachings, and for a couple hours together, we can enter into some lights and get away from the darkness of the world. And that's what the Rebbe is saying now. That no matter how dark of a situation we're in, and no matter how constricting the world around us is, and no matter how difficult it may appear to live in these circumstances, when one is connected to God, he can live above the customs of the world. Because then he has the power to combine two opposite things. Even though he finds himself in a physical world which is connected to Haman, which is physicality and everything's about money and physical things, nevertheless, he doesn't have to bow down to them. He could stay like Mordechai. Because when he's connected to God, he's above it. He's above it. He's in it, but he's above it. Test. According to the teachings of the Midrash. Explained about two different ways how about a Jew is to conduct himself in the time of the exile. 1 second, I'm going to read my notes here. Okay. We always have to remember that it's God who sent us to wherever we are. He has put us in these places, and we're here for a particular reason. Even though we find ourselves in the exile under the rulership of whatever the king Achashverosh is in our individual countries or cities or states, wherever we are. And the Torah tells us we have to conduct ourselves according to the laws of the country we're in. It's possible to conduct yourself still in a godly way. Not in two opposite realities. That even though we may find ourselves under the rulership of a non-Jewish leader who may not be conducting things the way we want, nevertheless, we don't have to bow down in our mind to that type of reality. We don't have to bow down to those types of customs. We don't have to live like that. Since the God is the one who sent us into the exile. That even though we are in a world that appears to be run by Haman and Achashverosh, we can still be connected to Mordechai, and we don't have to bow down to it. We don't have to bow down to the temptations. We don't have to bow down to the darkness. We don't have to bow down to any of these negative things that appear to be holding us down. The whole key is to connect to God in a deep way, so we can be in it but above it simultaneously. First of all, the Rebbe says you have to conduct yourself as a Jew. You have to be a Shulchan Aruch Yid. Every nuance of halacha, the way that God tells you to live, you need to live. Whether it makes sense or not. God says this is how to live, this is how we have to live. Hari, move on, but Pashut in a simple way. And remember that no one, even in the times of the exile, is a balabayat over a Jew. Only God himself has ownership over us. He's the only one that we ever bow down to, that we ever say, God, you're in charge. Everyone else are just temporary positions that God put them in as part of this game of exile that he's playing. We don't have to conduct ourselves like the way of Haman, like the nations of the world. But we can conduct ourselves like Mordechai. We do not bow down to their ways. Omar HaMidrash, as the Midrash says, to what appears to be contradictions of one and the other that appear to be opposites. According to the world, these two opposite realities can't exist. But according to God, they can. Because when you're connected to God, again, you could be in this physical prison, not literally like with bars. I mean, of this world that appears to be so glamorous and so tempting, and at the same time be completely above it. A Jew finds herself here in the exile. And nevertheless, when we're connected to God, we can be completely above the exile. We don't have to bow down to exile. It doesn't just mean physically bowing down. It means bowing our head to non-kosher food, to goyish parties, to a goyish way of life. We don't have to do it, even though it's everywhere around us. We can stay above it. Even though it appears that there are non-Jewish rulers running our cities and states and our countries, they're not in charge of us. We have to follow their laws. We can't just run through the street shrieking naked, screaming, I'm connected to God, I'll do what I want. We have to live according to the laws of the place we're in. But at the same time, we do not have to feel like they're in charge of us. Because they're only there because God put them there. And we're only listening to them because God told us to listen to them. I heard one time in a shir one time, someone was saying how hard it is to have kavod v'avim, to honor and respect your parents. And they were basically saying to the rabbi, listen, you don't know my father. He's a jerk. I can't stand him. And he's going off on, how am I supposed to honor and respect him? My mother, blah, blah. And he has all these reasons why not to honor his parents. And he said, you're right. You're not honoring your parents because of what they do or what they don't do. You're honoring your parents because God tells you to do so. And it's the same idea. We're following the laws of the nations and these so-called leaders in these places, not because we're afraid of them or because we think that they have some kind of power over us. It's because God is instructing us to do it. But we always have to remember, only God is above us. And that's what it says in Gomorrah, according to the will of one and the other. Like the will of Mordechai and Haman. And this is the kunz right here. This is the whole point. The reason that Mordechai was able to stand so strong and not bow down to the pressure of Haman, not just his physical presence, but his teachings, his way of trying to conduct, to get the Jews to act like non-Jews, to fall for all this glamour and fancy, whatever it is in this world. And the reason Mordechai was not only able to withstand it, but to be so strong right in the face of it and say, psh, is because he was completely bittul to God. He completely surrendered himself and said, God, I'm here for you. It's a high bar, and it's not a simple thing to do, but it's a shift in the mindset. And when we shift this consciousness of it's about me, this is Haman, to it's about God, this is Mordechai. When it's about God, then you could stand strong regardless of what the obstacles or temptations may be. Because now it's not your power, it's God's power. You get it? When you are connected to God in a deep connection, He's the one who gives you the power to resist all these things. Excuse me. He's the one who gives you the power to live above the nature in the nature. Because it's not your power anymore. It's God's power. And there's no power in this world that is stronger than God's power. But and that's how, despite all the decrees and all this negative stuff, Mordechai was able to stand strong because he was with God. And this is what we see, that Hashem is instructing every Jew to conduct themselves according to this will. Even though we find ourselves in the Galus, in the exile. And we are in a place that we have to conduct ourselves according to this will. The power that will give us strength to stand against any of these oppositions is Torah and mitzvot. This is our armor. This is our power. This is our weapon. And the way we have to conduct ourselves, even though the entire world has all these temptations. Avodah Zarah, which is idol worship, the way of Haman. We still have to conduct ourselves like Mordechai. And then we could stand with the strength of God above the exile and above the obstacles. We don't bow down to any of these undesirable things. This is another powerful sentence. And the only thing that is dependent upon is his will. Ratzon. This is Keter. It's will. It's Ratzon. If you want it, you can have it. But you got to want it bad enough to not give up when things get hard. Everything depends on our will. In other words, we're living in a time, it's not Soviet Russia anymore. It's not that if you do all these things, they're going to lock you up. We're free. We can learn Torah. We can do mitzvot. We can daven. We can learn Hasidus. We can learn about Mashiach and Geula. We can do anything and everything that God commands us if we want. Yud. And now we're Gabi Yosef. And now we're going back to our original quagmire of where we started this whole sikha, of the power of Yehuda, even though he's the one who's going before Yosef, who's second in command to Pharaoh. Even though Yosef ruled over the whole land of Egypt. Nevertheless, that even though he stood right before Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Wait, hold on one second. Wait 1 second. I got lost. Okay. Even though the Yosef inside ruled over the land. This is indicative of all kach shehudi who this is showing that every single Jew is a balabayit. That we are, even though we're in under the rulership, so to speak, of a foreign nations, we're still they don't have any power over us. This is connected to the decrees of the king and the strength of the place. So now we're going to talk about what's going on here. It says that Yosef Tzaddik, even though he was second in command to Egypt, and no one lifted a finger in all of Egypt without his permission, he still had to answer to Pharaoh. He was not in charge of Egypt. He was for everyone else, but Pharaoh was the boss. He had that goy, that foreign leader telling him what to do. It's not Yehuda, it's something else. He went before Yosef, the second in command of Egypt, with no permission. He didn't have to ask anyone. Yosef has to ask Pharaoh. Yehuda asked nobody because he was connected above. But Paul because even though he found himself under the exile, he was not bound by this exile. He didn't let it intimidate him. He was able to combine two opposite realities. He was able to go according to the nature. He went in front of Yosef, who was like Pharaoh himself. So he went and acknowledged this person's just like Pharaoh. He didn't know it was his brother. This person's second in command. He's running the whole Egypt. And I need to go to him because he's the one who's going to determine whether my brother gets out. But I know he's not the one who's going to determine whether my brother can sell. Because him and Pharaoh and this whole world are under God. And God's the one who's going to determine. And therefore, I don't care how big of a throne he has. I don't care how many stripes are on his shoulder. I don't care what's in his bank. I don't care how many carriages he has. It means nothing to me. Because I'm connected to God. And when I'm connected to God, even though I'm going to go and in a respectful way present myself to the ruling body in this world, they are not calling the shots. God's calling the shots. And because I'm connected to God, I've got no fear. And I've got no fear, and I'm going with brightness, with boldness, with strength. Kahonis. And this is the power, because it wasn't Yehuda's power. It's God's power. When we nullify our will to God's will, we have unlimited power. There's no one and nothing in this world that is more powerful than God. There's no ruler, there's no commander, there's no one that's more powerful than God. And this gave the power for the end of the Parsha for the Jewish people to be chill. Even though they found themselves in the exile of Egypt, Egypt is from the same root of boundaries or limitations. Under the auspices of Pharaoh, nevertheless, the Jewish people were able to dwell in a totally chill, comfortable way. No stress, no worries, nothing. True calmness. They were in a place of boundaries and limitations, and they were able to live above boundaries and limitations. All because of Yehuda's brightness, because he did not allow this false image that somehow, but who am I? I'm just this little Jew, and there's a big king, and it's a big kingdom, and he's got all these rulers, and he's got all these people, and he's so powerful, and I'm nobody, and he didn't get into that small-mindedness. He came in there like he owned the place. Excuse me. And this is where we see for 17 years Yaakov lived in Egypt in a total wideness, money, spirituality, physical, spiritual. He was, because the nations of the world respect the Jewish people when we respect ourselves. And when we stop groveling in front of the UN, but we have permission to fight back, and we have permission, and we're allowed. We like a little they step on us. When we come with strength of, who are you? This is our country. God gave it to us. Stick your head up your ass and mind your own business. I don't need you. I don't need your permission for anything. They don't go like, they go like timid little. It's not how you conduct yourself with the nations of the world. You have to go as what is true. But if you look, unfortunately, to the quote-unquote leadership and government in Israel, they're not God-fearing Jews. Israel, the Constitution of Israel doesn't mention God's name one time. The currency has no mention of God. They built a state, a non-holy state in a holy country. And they want to know why they have so many problems. You know, the Rebbe said after the 6-Day War, that if the Jewish people, if the leaders of Israel at that time would have stood up and said, this is a complete miracle, God put our enemies into our hand, the God of Israel has destroyed our enemies, Moshiach would have came right then. Right away, well, we had a superior army and we had greater intelligence. And that's why we have so many problems now. But that's for another discussion. Yudolf. And now we see the concept of how Yehuda approached Yosef and how it's connected to the Haftorah, where it says that Yehuda and David HaMelech and Mashiach, who come from Yehuda, will be rulers over the entire land. Because Yehuda was connected to God, he was able to be in the world and conduct himself in a way completely above the world. Zohi hakana ben hagas es koach lechabes haguda mitzvah shlema, and this gave the power to bring about the true and complete redemption. When a Jew goes with brightkeit, with boldness, in God's name, in the Rebbe's name, this is what brings redemption. And we will see this when Moshiach comes. The entire nations of the world will bow down and realize, holy crap, like there's a God, and the Jewish people are one with God, and wow, because we'll have self-respect, and they'll respect us. Because one is completely connected to the power of God. The whole nations of the world recognize. And the Goyim will see that I am God. Shemelech HaMashiach, the Rambam says, that Melech HaMashiach will fight the wars of God. And he will be victorious. And the entire world will speak with a pure tongue, and they will all worship the one true God. As Melech HaMashiach, like Mordechai, does not bow down or lift his head down for anyone or anything in the world. You see, it's interesting how the Rebbe, very kind and always nice, always welcoming his neighbors and everyone. And you see, if the postman walks by, the garbage man comes by, a policeman walks by, the Rebbe always waves. You'll never see the Rebbe go like this. You'll never, ever see him bow his head to a goy. Only to God. As we said in many places, the power for King Moshiach who comes from the tribe of Yehuda, comes from this week's parsha, from Yehuda approaching. Yehuda mekabel hashpa'ah mi Yosef. That even though Yosef was sitting in that chair, in that throne, the one who really had the power was Yehuda. Because Yosef still had to answer to King Pharaoh. He still had a goy on top of him. He still, at that point in time, had the realization that he was not free to act how he wanted to, because he was still enslaved as a second in charge, but he was still under Pharaoh's rulership. Yehuda was connected to God with complete strength and power, and therefore he had the power to be victorious and open the gates for redemption. And we also see the connection to bringing Mashiach closer through prayer, because Yehuda is connected to prayer. Yehuda is from the tribe of King David, which is Malchus, and Malchus is connected to speech, which is prayer. And that's why it's very important to pray. Sometimes we can get despondent. We look out in the world and we're like, it's a complete balagan. What are we going to do? You can pray. You can always pray. You can always pray. And that's what God wants. He wants our heart. He wants us to say, not just, well, this is how it is. On one hand, okay, this is my situation. I have to find a way to go above it. But I have to pray to Hashem. שגם בתפילה נמשך עניין הגאולה, אז הגאולה יזכרחסה, שמלכוס עצמה נראה המלאך הגואל, על פנים הרע יש להיסר וזה ויגש אליו יהודה, מגש יוסף. Excuse me, יוסף. והיבט והקבל אשר יוסף. ומגרתו של יהודה. ומשהו זוקק עליו, רק כדי לגלוס את תוך השלמוס כפי שהיה לסידבו. אוקיי, יובס. Al Piana Yuvan Gamkin, Alain, what Hora'am, Yigash, I love you, Huraban, the Reno, had Foisenu, Bamira, Lamiad, the Go, the Mitzvah. The Rebbe says, how much more do all these teachings apply to us right now, the last generation of the exile and the first generation of the redemption? Imrei said, Toichev Shel Yehuda, Zmano, Mordechai, Zmano, Shal, and Sadi. Yehudim, Bakal, Hadoretz. The Hal Hadoretz will go on Mahutz. Tzar umat ha'olam v'goyishkeit. No, Gezroisim. Shal Yisrael Achman Tzan. Since throughout our history, we've seen the Jewish people have been enslaved and subjected to many harsh, cruel rulers that have ruled over us very cruelly. We have not been able to keep Judaism. Look at communist Russia. Look at throughout our history. It's been so challenging. This is not the time, not the case in our time and place. In fact, the nations of the world are helping the Jewish people practice Judaism. It's never happened before. And the only thing that is dependent is on our own will. And we have the capacity to be fruitful and multiply. And not just in our physical thing, but in our spiritual. Especially when we conduct ourselves with brightness, like Yehuda did. And we say we're not going to be enslaved in our minds, in our hearts, or any capacity to the nations of the world. Especially we find ourselves in America, the kingdom of a kingship of kindness. But they allow the Jews to conduct themselves according to our will, how we want. And this is true in many countries across the world. And all these decrees of previous times don't exist anymore. You see, the Jews, for the most part, are free to conduct themselves openly as Jews. Not only that, we see they're helping us, they're assisting us. Before, they're assisting us even in keeping Torah and mitzvot. The furthest corners of the world, Jews are allowed to keep Torah and mitzvot. And not only that, the nations of the world also are now wanting to connect to God by keeping the 7 laws of Noah. The Rebbe said, even the previous Rebbe said, everything is prepared and ready for the redemption. The Rebbe said, and everything is prepared and ready for redemption. And that it's already, we've seen all the signs and the preparation for the redemption. And at the time it's necessary only to draw down the redemption in actuality into this physical world. And will be revealed with our physical eyes that we are already in the days of Moshiach. And today, that all that is necessary is to open up our eyes. And then we will see how the entire world and every Jew is already standing and ready for the true and complete redemption. There is to say, as the Rebbe said, only thing that is left is dependent on our will. And we're standing moments before the redemption. And Mashiach will stand up from the tribe of Yehuda, and he will be the ruler over the whole world. And the whole nation will, all the nations will know that I am God. And this is together with the power of the Yosef of our generation, the Frierdiker Rebbe. Yesh Gam as V'yigash Lav Yehuda, the power to approach. Moshiach Shabo B'Kiroi Mamish. Moshiach is so close right now. And King David's tribe will rule over the whole world once again. And we get this power also from Yosef, who's second to Pharaoh. It's connected to the in Kedusha, these very high lights in the upper worlds of chaos, of Tohu. And these teachings especially apply to us in our generation. God created the entire world for us. The concept of Yehuda approaching. In our generation, as we're approaching Hey Tevis, the day of the redemption of the books. And whatever, it's not time to go into it. And this should be the day of it was the day, it should be even more of the redemption of the holy books that were kept captive. The teachings of our Rebbes and our leaders. The Rebbe said, how can it be that there's still holy books from a Rebbe sitting in Russia? We must get these books out. They must be redeemed. The Rebbe said we must all buy holy books, and bring more holy books into our homes, and bring more holiness into our homes. We must take, good resolutions upon ourselves connected to all these matters. One thing the Rebbe says, we have to purchase new books, as we just said, by holy books, and put them in your house. This is one of the mitzvahs of the Rebbe, to fill your home with holy books. This is the way the Jewish people conducted themselves, even for little kids, to have holy books. Yud Dalet, may it be God's will. We should all buy new books. And we should all take upon ourselves these teachings, like Yehuda, that we should conduct ourselves with boldness. Just like when he rescued Binyamin. We must rescue all these books. The Rebbe made a big campaign to take all these books back from Russia. It's a whole long, complicated story. Not for tonight. So these holy books of our Rebbe's must return to their rightful place in 770. 770 is Gematria Paratsta, which means to spread out. Hashem Sri Foy the call Hasfarim. Speaking Shal Rebbe Senu Nasiyim. The Techam Mead Mamish. And it should be immediately. Above Pidiyam Shavarim, that all these books should be rescued. Pidiyam Shavuim shall cause Tzur Kadusha Ba'odim, including all the sparks that they contain within them. The Techam Mead Mamish, and immediately. Haduchim Kal Yehudim, all the Jewish people will go together. In the reign of the Zikanenu are young and are old. In the name of the sin are sons and our daughters. Kaspam Chasamatam, with our money, with our kesef, Kolal Kol Hasfarim, and our holy books. The Retzina Kedusha to our holy land. Yerushalayim Har Kodesh to the holy city of Jerusalem. The Har Kodesh to the holy mountain, and the base of Biggest Shlishi, the Kodesh Kedoshim, the holy of holies. Shumnim Seim Even Shtia, and the foundation stone. Lish Shunei Hazman B'Rias Ha'olim, without any change in anything that should happen right now. He the Chazet Tekavliad Mamish, and it should happen literally Mamish right now. Feel the name of Marina Rabbeinu Melech HaMashiach Lamud. We should have the fullest Galos of Melech HaMashiach. Hashem should bless us all, that we should be able to be bold and strong in who we are, that the Jewish people, that the leaders in Israel should be bold and strong to the nations of the world. They should take back our hostages. We should have Geula right now. God bless you, Moshiach Now. See you in the base of Mikdash, and if not, next Monday at 8 p.m. All the best.